What's good, YouTube? Back to another, welcome back to another video. And today we about to be watching Archons in the Sky, Materialist UFO Capture, and the Jungian Response. I don't know what that is, but I guess we're gonna learn together. Without further ado, let's get into the video.
And deeper we go indeed, especially when you have an exclusive private stream of Aeon Byte, deeper into that rabbit hole down with Lilo in the Fifth Element. So good to see everybody. And yes, welcome to Aeon Byte. My name is Miguel Connor. And today I am always very excited to have back Angie Speaks. We will have our second part of what I, as mentioned before, probably I feel the most important book of perhaps even our generation, because it does show the problem and it brings the solution. And that is Late Stage Babylon, Navigating the Post-Secular Spiritual Crisis. Angie, thanks for coming back.
Thank you so much. And once again, thank you for the wonderful, beautiful introduction. So happy to be back. I love coming on your show.
We love having you here, and with us too, we got Graham. Graham, how are you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing pretty good. I want to hear what Angie has to say for us on, managing the collapse we're going through.
Brace yourself, right?
That's yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. The veil is going to be thinned very much today.
Mm-hmm. It is indeed. I mean, there's so much to unpack with your book. This is what we'll cover today, is again just another sliver of the issues, which is the whole UFO extraterrestrial insanity that's happening versus many other insanities that are happening. So, and yes, for the audience, I already see a few people on Patreon. If you have any questions, please let me know. Same with those on the YouTube member section, and we'll get to them. Again, this is partial for non-members and full for all members on Patreon, AB Prime, and the YouTube membership. Join, because we got a lot of these exclusive ones. So, well, let's get to the flying saucers, or before we get to the flying saucers, Angie, let's get to the issue at hand. Again, part of your book does deal with the UFO phenomena and what's going on. So how would you say has the cultural status of the UFO phenomenon shifted from a fringe schizo topic to a matter of serious political and national security concern? I mean, what the hell happened?
Yeah, I mean, it's been really fascinating to watch. And this is something I've been interested in for a very long time. It's also something that Jung wrote extensively about. Obviously, his essay, Flying Saucers, A Modern Myth of Things Seen in the Sky, has been incredibly influential. Although underground, it's like influential among the true schizos. And like kind of little bits of it might break into mainstream culture now and then. Through figures like Jacques Vallée, for instance, or Diana Pasulka. But it's still kind of a foundational text, I think, specifically because it doesn't just deal with the material side or the military side or the governmental side of ufology. It grounds it in sort of ancient symbolism and alchemy. And it sort of, talks about it from the vantage point of the secular kind of age being kind of a blip in human civilization. It's only been the last 200 years thereabout. Right. But prior, whenever we saw celestial phenomenon, we had a language for it that wasn't necessarily solely material. And I think that as we accelerate into the technological age, as we sort of leave behind spirit in favor of matter, you're sort of seeing a bifurcation within ufology. You have on one end, the schizos who like still acknowledge the sort of spiritual, immaterial aspect of the phenomenon, and then you have the kind of military, governmental, kind of material side of it. And then also because we're, my book has a lot to do with like the disenchantment of the modern age and the effect that the kind of cold secularism that we've been dealing with for the last century has had on the collective psyche. The UFO sort of conversation acts as a way for modern people to re-enchant the world in a way, but through the guise of this kind of technological myth, or this sort of stellar myth that's being born as we speak. So there are lots of different nodes to it. There's the spiritual node, there's the governmental side, the sort of materialist side, the military industrial complex side. And they all seem to be kind of chirping different tunes at the moment. But I think Jung, especially because he wrote his treatise on it in the aftermath of World War II. And he sort of was seeing a similar kind of technological geopolitical acceleration in his time. He saw how this phenomenon very deeply intersects with the collective psyche during times of mass upheaval and of deep change. So yeah, I hope to kind of get into some of that today. For sure.
Well, a lot to unpack. Yeah, as I mentioned in our last show for the audience, my David Bowie book really leans on both Angie's work from her YouTube channel and her book, and also, of course, Jung's Flying Saucers. It somehow just, of all UFO books, seems to just keep, it's so timely. It hasn't, and more important than ever. And of course, Jung left it kind of open-ended, like he did many things, because he wants people to be dynamic and get what they want. And of course, David Bowie falls into the whole Starman myth, UFO myth. So check it out when the book comes out. But as far as the government, Angie, there's that famous quote by Otto von Bismarck: "Never believe anything until it is officially denied by the government." And you could also do the opposite. Don't believe anything if the government supports it. What do you think they're doing? Because like you said, this is a new myth, and myth brings meaning, brings people together, like going to the moon and the astronaut was very important for us and so forth. Do you think the government are trying to be archonic and trying to appropriate this myth for control, or what do you think?
Absolutely. I mean, it is a numinous phenomenon. It does exist in the realm of the unknown. So there's so much that can be controlled about the phenomenon itself. But in terms of the narratives that get sort of spun surrounding the phenomena, it tends to focus mainly on the material aspect of it, the military industrial complex aspect of it. Or when the government is kind of myth making, or the powers that be are myth making, it's largely around technological acquisition. And I mean, UFO cults and things like that have been a thing throughout the 20th century. And the danger of them is that they tend to focus a lot more on the promise of like technological acquisition from higher intelligences that will somehow bring humanity into some kind of utopic future. And it's a lot less to do with spiritual development or moral development. That side doesn't matter to them. It's all about, technological acquisition, perhaps even things like genetic manipulation.
Well, that's the case. I mean, it'd be like that. Certain people certain people prefer certain things. I mean, yeah, certain people prioritize different things depending on who they are, what they want. So, but me personally, I'd rather the latter. So, yeah.
It really ties into the techno eschaton aspect that I discussed when I was last on the show. The idea of technology as a savior. In one aspect, technology is being presented as a savior by the powers that be, but in another way, it's also kind of being subtly implied that the UFO phenomenon itself will be this kind of technological god in the machine archetype.
Mhm.
which I think takes away from the numinosity of the phenomenon and turns it into this sort of purely material um, sort of venture in that sense, which is where I think the archonic dimension of this plays a role. Um, a bit later, I'll get into the sort of twofold mercurial nature
Sure.
of the phenomenon, but the government and the powers that be seem to only be focused on the material aspect and not necessarily the spiritual aspect of what it means to look up at the sky and into the celestial realm and to see a certain intelligence within the cosmos. So yeah, there's kind of a split, and the sort of narratives that we're seeing coming out of, you know, the powers that be tend to focus solely on the material aspect and not the sort of cosmic intelligence aspect.
Right, the numinous, the awe, which which is what myth is supposed to bring us. And do you think that's? It seems to be that's the problem, Angie, because somehow we haven't learned. We still are looking for a savior, and the government or the kings or the priests, they're doing their job. They will prepackage a savior for us, and it's our fart. It is kind of a cosmic fart. Our fault, because Jung said nobody's coming to save you. You have to save yourself, your inner Christ. So it's like we haven't learned, are we? Because I'm sure people
Absolutely.
will buy, they'll buy whatever it is, Trump, materialism, AI, UFO. They'll buy the next savior, and that's a trap, as you say.
Absolutely. I don't think it's an accident that this summer the sort of Dune Messiah film is coming out, the sequel to Dune, and Frank Herbert kind of foresaw the danger of the Messiah archetype and what happens when it sort of constellates. And I mean, in the Dune narrative, you have the Bene Gesserit, who are kind of the hidden hand behind the steering of the narrative of the Muad'Dib. And it's very similar to kind of what's going on now in our current culture. The powers that be are kind of acting like a hidden hand, attempting to hijack the numinosity of this archetype that's constellating in the collective unconscious. And I mean, to go back to Jung's flying saucer essay, he sort of saw this as like a confrontation with the self archetype in the 20th and 21st century. The self being the numinous phenomenon that contains both the light and the dark aspects of human existence. He linked it to the aqua permanens of the alchemists, which is sort of the permanent water, the water of the philosophers, which is both a psychic and a material substance, alchemically speaking. It appears both psychically, and it is also something that can materialize in the physical world. And it's linked to Mercurius, or the archetype of Mercurius. And as we know, Mercurius.
I mean, it don't sound too far fetched if we, or me personally, I've seen things about UFOs, like what um, they have capabilities of going up, down, and like just completely different than what we have. Our flying objects, we got what jets and planes from what we know or what they disclose to us. We have jets and planes, and yeah, they might be fast for sure, but it's not like automatic in a way. It's you gotta do extra. I'm not explaining it. It's just not. They're way more capable with when it comes to movement and stuff like that, or from the way that's depicted. That's what it is. Like, but who knows?
Holds both healing potential and poisonous potential.
All right.
And you see this a lot in the accounts within ufology communities of sightings, encounters, and abductions. Some are incredibly numinous and life affirming, while some are absolutely horrifying and traumatizing. So there's kind of a twofold phenomena going on here when it comes to the way that the collective unconscious is interacting with the archetype. On one hand, you'll have things that I guess represent a kind of more angelic consciousness, like, you know, the beings, that the sort of orbs that gather around nuclear sites, for instance, and prevent nuclear catastrophe. Or with the crop circle phenomenon, you have mandalas, and within the
Facts. I ain't gonna lie. Them crop circles is like it's unexplained and it's crazy. Like the way it's intricately like crafted and how what happens even like they just be appearing out of nowhere. Uh, It's a crazy phenomenon.
Jungian corpus, the mandala tends to constellate in the psyche when the psyche is fragmented, to remind the psyche of wholeness. And I don't think it's an accident that during, like, you know, World War II, World War One, and those times of great kind of distress within the collective psyche, the crop circle phenomenon, you know, started to materialize these great symbols of totality and symmetry, which kind of have a somewhat angelic resonance to them, began to appear out of nowhere. And then on the other end of the spectrum, the less angelic side, the more demonic side of the spectrum, you have things like abductions, you know, human gene programs, like the idea of like interbreeding. These are all things that you see within the Fae lore of old as well. The idea of, like, you know, changelings or people being spirited off to the Fae realm, and that sort of thing. So we've always these sorts of phenomenons within the collective unconscious. They're not new. There's a lot of correlation between, you know, demonology, Fae lore, angelic encounters, those sorts of things, and the modern encounters that are occurring and sort of bubbling around the zeitgeist in the form of these collective rumors. The only difference is that now, because we are existing in a stellar age, we're now creating stellar myths instead of chthonic myths to do with like fairies and daimons and and that kind of thing. So yeah, there's when we ignore the numinosity of it and the fact that we're actually interacting with the aqua permanence, with the sort of mercurial archetype of the psyche, it sort of robs us of our ability to discern the phenomena, to see whether it's benevolent or malevolent or neutral and sort of trickster like the Fae. The kind of narrative that's being pushed by the powers that be actually mystifies the phenomenon a lot more. And the more mystified it is, the more afraid people are, the more likely people are to buy into any old thing, any old narrative. Whereas, I mean, I have my little book on alchemy here. For thousands of years, we've sort of been tracking these archetypes. I have another one here called the Book of Miracles. And basically it tracks meteorological phenomenon and sort of celestial phenomenon from the 16th century. And you see very similar orbs, mandalas,
Damn, she been doing her research for real.
even the sort of flying cigar shaped object. These are things that have been tracked for almost a millennia or more even, of these different sort of celestial phenomenons occurring. But in ancient times, we had different ways of understanding them. We understood them alchemically. We understood them as manifestations of the cosmos. We had a more deeper understanding of the cosmos and the beings that kind of populate the cosmos, from the angelic to the demonic to the liminal kind of jinn, fae kind of creatures. And yeah, I think that within the UFO phenomenon that's occurring now, for me, it's the same phenomenon. It's either something angelic going on or something demonic, or something kind of fae related in that sense, but sort of manifesting through the stellar consciousness that we've developed during the sort of post-industrial technological age.
Well said indeed. And of course I agree. I think at the end of the day, I know it's hard for people to understand, but reality is interactive. I mean, we accept it when we're on our phone. That's how reality is in this simulation. So we do give it our cultural surroundings were affected. Like Diana Pasulka talking about Teresa de Avila, when she had her ecstasy, she was seeing orbs, but of course they changed it to angels, but she was seeing again the circle, the mandala, from the archetype, how it appears. And there's a famous story, Kenneth Arnold never said there were flying saucers. He said it skipped the water like a saucer, but that circle was so powerful that suddenly all these flying saucers appear. People are seeing them. They're interacting with them. Like Jung said, they are telekinetic. They can, we can touch them. They can take us. But so it seems that it is in a way interactive. It is beyond our morality. It is trickster, and we feed it, and it feeds us. And like you said, the circle, Kenneth Arnold was perfect because the circle is, as you write in your book, a symbol of a transition, but it's also a symbol of salvation. People who make breakthroughs in therapy see a circle. So it all works together. Am I making sense, Angie?
Absolutely.
I don't want to,
Absolutely,
I know people want a
100%.
gray alien and kick tire technology, and that's easy, and we shoot the aliens.
Exactly. It's a lot more complicated than that. And unfortunately, it's because we've lost a lot of this spiritual, alchemical knowledge in modern culture. So it's a lot easier for us to exist in this sort of state of mystification. And it does affect our ability to discern the phenomenon, which is what's dangerous, because it's not all love and light and mandalas. Some of it's incredibly dark, and there are forces in the cosmos that want us fragmented and dragged into materiality, and that's like the sort of more material aspect of it. And then there are forces that want to steer us towards wholeness, and then there are forces that are more neutral, like the Fae, like in the great sort of alchemical work, for instance, of enlightenment. The Fae are kind of seen as these as liminal beings that they represent kind of the soul of the anima mundi, right? And they live within nature, but they also live within the enchanted
Oh, what is that?
parts of our psyches. And if the sort of archonic, demonic aspect wants to disenchant the world, destroy nature, and also disenchant our psyches and turn us into like a hive mind, that obviously affects the realms within which these liminal Fae beings exist. So some of the phenomenon we're seeing is sort of Fae coded, the sort of trickstery kind of amoral phenomenon that has that kind of coded energy is kind of Fae coded. But then you have the darker aspect, which is more archonic, which is more about trapping the soul in matter and technological acceleration and that kind of thing. And there are 3 different archetypes that I see within ufology that kind of represent the darker side of the phenomenon. As we know, Mercury is a shapeshifter, so there's a ton of shapeshifting going on. So the first is the gray alien, which tends to be this kind of incredibly cold, harmonic being. In many of the encounters, they tend to sort of coldly experiment on humans as if they are, specimens in a lab. There's not very much humanity to them. So they kind of represent, archetypally speaking, the cold.
I mean, I don't think there would be that much humanity anyway. Not to them.
Rationalist impulse. I don't think it's an idea. I don't think it's an accident that Rudolf Steiner, for instance, when he did his sculpture of Ahriman, it looks very similar to a gray alien.
Really? Wow.
So,
you
and then
mentioned
also,
Crowley.
Lamb. Yeah, Crowley's lamb also looks very similar to a gray alien. I think it represents the sort of cold, pragmatic intelligence of like the Ahrimanic sort of constellation or archetype in that sense. And then you have the mantid beings. These beings are also incredibly common within ufology as well. And I think they kind of represent like an atavistic regression back to a hive mind, which we kind of see happening with humanity through technology and algorithmic sync and all of those things. So I think the mantid being appearing represents this sort of atavistic regression into kind of like bug-like beings, but obviously it's being done through this very kind of accelerated technological means. And then you also have the kind of Aryan Pleiadian beings, who in certain ufology communities are used as symbols of perfected humanity.
Love and light.
Yeah. And and I think that has to do with like genetic manipulation, because they're obviously they're viewed as the kind of blueprint of what we're trying to ascend to through technology. And they're always super blonde and super elf-like kind of Tolkien-esque
Right.
elf beings, and it's sort of this distorted scientific I guess biological eschaton in a way, where the idea that we've fallen from these sort of great stellar beings, whereas they're kind of a luciferic mimic of perfection, of the angelic in a way.
Mhm.
And then you also have finally the reptilian archetype, which is also kind of, rampant in the ufology community. And I think that represents the lizard brain, like the
Right.
psychopathy of the elites, the psychopathy that, data-driven, technology-driven societies tend to overlook, because obviously,
Yeah, she obviously, I mean, she definitely knows the stuff when it comes to this alien stuff.
if the machine is doing it, it doesn't really matter. It's that cold sort of lizard logic. So these sort of 4 archetypes are constellating on the dark side of the ufology sort of phenomenon, to contrast the more angelic kind of mandala symbols of wholeness and the sort of more trickstery, fey-like intermediary. And I feel like the reason that the powers that be don't want us to look at alchemy or any of the sort of schizo stuff
Right.
is because they don't want us to be able to discern the phenomenon. But in my opinion, it's actually quite easy to discern the phenomenon if you understand like the order of being, the great work, and how the great work is either being aided or kind of destroyed, and the sort of great fall into matter that's sort of being accelerated by the powers that be. And I think the reason why there's so much focus in the culture and the mainstream outlets on the technological kind of military aspect is because they don't want us to be able to discern the phenomenon, and also they don't want us to see the numinous potential. The
Mhm.
numinous potential, the angelic side, shows us something incredibly important for our age, which is that the sort of veil between matter and spirit is incredibly thin.
Mhm.
Which is why I think they do things like create mandalas in crop fields, and
Right.
show us like in an incredibly disenchanted secular age, getting people to look up at the sky and to wonder about the intelligence in the cosmos and the order of being within the cosmos. Is incredibly shattering to the sort of Ahrimanic archonic paradigm as well. So they don't want us to connect to the numinous side of the UFO phenomenon. They want us to remain focused on the sort of dark materialist aspect that has a lot to do with technological acceleration, genetic manipulation, and so on and so forth. But yeah, the numinous aspect, the most powerful aspect of it for the Aquarian age, is people beginning to viscerally understand that the veil between matter and spirit is thin, and that is the work of the alchemist. The work of gnosis is the realization on a deep visceral level that the sort of the sort of Cartesian split between matter and spirit is actually super fake, and that's the true eschaton. That's actually what is going to lead us into the age of Aquarius, not technological acceleration without any kind of moral development in that sense.
Beautifully said. Yes, as Matthew McConaughey says, as Interstellar, we used to look up at the stars, and now we just look at our place in the dirt. And I think you and I would agree, Angie, that the savior of this age is Hermes or Mercury. It's a trickster. It's how we get through. And people are, oh, the age of Horus and Jesus. Well, they are kind of trickster, Jesuses, but if we focus on Hermes, we'll be fine. Well, I want to bring in Graham right now if he has a question. I have a feeling, and this is my really bad joke, Angie, so you'll have to bear with me. But I think Graham has a positive and negative column, and he's thinking anal probes. Where should I put these? Just kidding, Graham. Do you have a question?
Nah, that's crazy work.
Sort of. I was going to say, my preference is, the Nordics. I think I prefer them over the reptilians or the insectoids, because hoplons and skin tight jumpsuits sounds like a lot more fun. But yeah, it's the. I agree that the whole government disclosure movement is something that tends to only happen once the government has their useful official narrative that they can package something into for public consumption. And until they have that, they just deny that it exists. And I was going to say, what my biggest question is, again, I see a lot of parallels between the the Marian apparitions, existing for centuries and then fading off and the UFOs taking over. So I see a connection there. But how do you address people who basically kind of dismiss Jung in his UFO book as, oh, those are just the last ravings of a senile old man who might have had brain damage when he had a heart attack? So that's my
question. I guess it's one thing that Jung I really like about Jung is that he was an empiricist and he believed in waiting on events. He wasn't trying to convince anybody. And he also stood on the shoulders of giants as well. Like he's drawing from Paracelsus and, the alchemists and mystics of old. He wasn't the first to synthesize this theory. He was perhaps the first to kind of correlate it to the phenomenon in the modern age. And he did his job of sort of transpersonal psychology in that sense. Mm-hmm. However, he's standing on the shoulders of thousands of years of human history of us attempting to understand our place in the cosmos, the chain of being, the spiritual reality, which is really what he thought this was forcing modern man to encounter. So for the cynics out there, as Terence McKenna said, the weirder things get, the more you're going to have to come to us schizos for answers.
Exactly. Yeah. Here we are in 2026.
Yeah. And like these aren't just my theories. I'm leaning on not just the Jungian corpus, but like I said, alchemical history, the history of, these sort of stellar occurrences from the 16th century onwards. There's a large, major sort of corpus of a sort of different, less materialist understanding of this phenomenon that's largely ignored by the mainstream, or viewed as like, flighty or schizo or whatever, despite being grounded in, thousands of years of human history. So yeah, that's kind of what I would say to them is like, take it up with Paracelsus. Leave me out of it.
Definitely, when the weird gets, when world gets weird, the weird gets going.
Exactly. Exactly. And I'm glad that the weird times are forcing people to take these sorts of detours into the numinous. Even though I don't necessarily agree with Diana Pasulka's entire kind of canon, she's kind of linked to Peter Thiel and all of that stuff. Yeah. I am glad that she wrote Encounters and American Cosmic, because she's one of the few voices that does also take into account the kind of numinous aspect of the phenomenon and doesn't just focus exclusively on the material side of it. And that's really rare in the ufology community. You either have the kind of ancient alien fanatics who basically are trying to hijack the spiritual reality and like make it all technology and material. It's actually not a god. It's a material alien from a different sphere who has superior technology to you, and because they have superior technology, therefore you must bow to them. It's like almost like a cosmic version of like colonizer logic.
It's kind of OD, bro. Imagine bowing to, like, I mean, T-Sound, but I guess
in a way, the idea that one must submit spiritually simply because of technological advancement, which is an incredibly anti-spiritual, dark idea that's sort of now being laundered in the ufology kind of strain of thought. Also, the concept of like genetic determinism, the idea that we are like a fallen race that needs to use technological augmentation in order to climb back up the chain of being. This is also kind of eugenics coded. There's like a lot of dark stuff that can sneak in through the back end when we don't have like the correct like foundation and also like spiritual discernment of the phenomenon and what's going on. And yeah, like understanding things like the angelic phenomena, angelology, demonology, the fae, the jinn, these sorts of liminal creatures as well. These are things that have been going on for thousands of years within the human external world in nature, but also within the collective psyche within. And that's what the aqua permanens really is. The water of the philosophers represents the time before matter and spirit was separated. It's basically the waters above the firmament when they were connected to the waters below the firmament. And the aqua permanens is the substance that was not separated, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So it's both spirit and matter. It's both material and physical. It's Mercurius, and the archetype of Mercurius. And the more we understand what the alchemists were attempting to understand, the more of a deeper understanding we'll have of some of this modern phenomena that we're seeing occur, and not just focus on one aspect of it over the other.
Well said. Yes, I think Frank. I think he's
Oh,
quoting
I lost
what
you.
Graham
I lost your
did.
sound.
You lost my sound. Graham, can you hear
Are
us?
you muted? Oh,
No, I'm not.
I can hear you.
you can
Can
hear
you hear
Miguel.
us
I
now?
can hear you. I can hear you, Graham, but I can't hear Miguel for some reason.
Graham, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay,
I
so
lost
Angie
you.
can hear. Graham, tell her that.
Wait, say
Can
something.
you hear me? Can you hear us?
Yeah, no. I can't hear Miguel for some reason. Hang on a moment.
That's an odd one.
Oh,
Let me
sorry,
quote Frank.
guys.
Hunter S. Thompson said, "When the going gets weird, the weird turns."
I can hear you,
pro."
Graham, perfectly well. Can you hear Miguel?
Yeah, I can hear Miguel just fine. I can hear both of you.
Oh
That's so
God.
strange.
Oh my
I'm
God.
the
So
only
we
one
might
it's
have-
working for.
Yeah.
There you go.
The archons have come to disrupt it once more.
Well,
oh dear.
I might
Um,
have to ask questions, and Graham will have to ask.
What did Miguel
Angie.
say?
I guess my next
Miguel's
question.
saying that Miguel's saying that he may, if he has to ask questions, I may have to be the translator.
Right,
Or
right.
I could like come. I can restart again if you.
Yeah,
are okay with that.
restart. I'm going to ask Graham a couple of questions. Yeah, restart. We'll jump back in.
What did he say?
Yeah, restart.
Miguel
tell her
said
to
to
restart.
go ahead. Miguel said to go ahead and restart. And he and I
Yeah,
are
I'll
going to
restart,
discuss it a little bit, and then
No
you
problem.
should be able to join back in.
No problem. I'll be back in 5.
Good. We'll see you soon.
See you
All
soon.
right, Frank can hear all three of us. So yeah, that is. I don't know what's wrong with Angie's thing. So while you're here, Graham, what is your view on UFO? Does it align with us, or do you have, or is it the traders?
No, the traders take advantage of the UFOs. They make money off of them.
Bastard. Of
Yeah.
course, as long as they can make money, that's it. Huh?
No. To me, the essence behind the UFOs is the idea of intelligent infinity, and we have our frame, and we're trying to process within our limited frame. We can only process things that are within spitting distance of our Overton window.
Mhm.
Something too far outside of that, we don't have the physical or mental or spiritual mechanics in order to process that one. And for that reason, the intelligent infinity can only work with the things that we've experienced in the past.
Right.
So
All right,
as
got
man,
Angie back. Can you
I
hear
can
me?
hear
Dave?
you now. Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay,
now.
so we're back. So yeah, Graham was giving us his view that, but we're just limited in our human perception right now.
yeah, that it's a question of we're dealing with intelligent infinity, and it's the human psyche and inability to process that infinity that we have to break it down. And it's intelligence infinity's efforts to communicate with us can only deal with those units that we have already experienced that are within at least spitting distance of our Overton window.
Absolutely. I think the aqua permanens acts as kind of like a psychic mirror as well. So depending on your own internal world and makeup, you might have a more angelic encounter, or you may have a more demonic encounter. And I think the reason why the darker encounters are a lot more prominent and a lot more reported is because obviously we're going through a lot collectively.
Right.
And our psyches are incredibly fragmented, which allows for the darker kind of aspect of the self to reflect itself within the phenomenon, rather than the sort of lighter, more healing aspect of the self. So yeah, I think in a way, it acts as a psychic mirror through our incredibly limited perception. But again, it contains to me both healing and also corrosive potential. And yeah, the thing I'm the most afraid of, I think, is the ontological shock that will occur inevitably when, en masse people begin to realize that the veil between matter and spirit is thin. And the fact that we as a secular society aren't like really prepared for that realization at all. And I think it's going to create utter chaos in many ways, but it's also like fertile ground as well for people to have these sort of direct encounters with the numinous as well. So yeah, I'm optimistic, but also terrified. And I think that's also the tone of Jung's essay on flying saucers as well. I think he's both like profoundly in awe, but also profoundly terrified about the
He's
potential.
very worried,
Yeah.
especially because we have nuclear capabilities.
Yeah, capabilities. Yeah. Big time. I also think that that's precisely why the government keeps teasing disclosure. It wants to keep people kind of distracted with the carrot on the stick,
Right.
so that they don't look at the spiritual reality of the phenomenon as well. You don't need to wait for disclosure. That's a waste of time and psychic energy. All you need to do is look at the history of spirituality and human attempt to engage with the living cosmos. That's your disclosure there. It's right there for you already. There's no need to wait for the big wigs in Washington or wherever else to tell you. And in fact, the things that they will disclose will tend to lead us down the rabbit hole of the more Ahrimanic, darker constellation of the self archetype, rather than the more numinous healing constellation of the self archetype. But yeah, the Jungian archetype of the self contains within it both the highest good and the lowest evil. So we're
Right.
really in this kind of liminal time where we're dealing with the archetype of Mercurius as both savior and antichrist. One of the things that Jung talked about was that Mercurius was actually the figure behind both the Christ archetype and the devil. So that's the sort of archetypal energy behind both Christ and the devil is Mercurius. So Mercurius is not like all love and light. He's also the sort of diabolical trickster, as well as the savior, or the sort of quicksilver that acts as the Deus ex machina, or the saving principle that reconciles opposites. He's both a reconciler and also he's utter dissolution. So when you're in the presence of that level of power and numinosity, it takes a certain level of spiritual fortitude and like spiritual discernment that like we've been kind of robbed of in the secular age, which is why I kind of saw it as like a spiritual duty in late stage Babylon, and in my own little way to kind of sound the alarm and let people know that stop buying the narratives that are being fed to you by the powers that be, and by like TV shows like Ancient Aliens and this and that, like
or Steven Spielberg's new movie, pure propaganda.
Exactly. Or the cottage industry of like disclosure influencers online as well, many of whom also benefit from the mystification of the phenomenon to keep you coming back and like keep you giving them views. You have a brain, you have a soul, you also have the ability to discern this information, so that there's no need to wait around for gurus or saviors. That's kind of the trap of this aeon. It's all about you and how you filter and encounter the numinous in that sense.
Yeah, agreed. And it's interesting, a little on a side note here, I don't think they can control these myths, because I don't know how it is in the UK, but the one other myth that is really exploding in the United States is Bigfoot everywhere. People are seeing more sightings of Bigfoot than Elvis or Jesus. And it doesn't matter if it's Portland or Virginia, and you're getting all these big groups of hunters. And it is a huge industry, and it's really
We have 4K cameras though. I mean, I've yet to see a combination of with the sightings
affecting the mass psyche, and people are now retconning Bigfoot. He was Esau in the Bible. He was Enkidu, and they're not wrong, because all we're doing is it's an archetype that's manifesting and telling us, basically telling us, get back to nature.
Yes, I did. I have I left him off my list of the 4. What a crime. How could I forget Bigfoot?
Oh, he's going to visit you tonight. He's not going to be happy.
Exactly. Well, yeah, we've talked about the Greys as the sort of Ahrimanic ones. We've talked about the Pleiadians. We've talked about the Mantids, and we've talked about the Reptilians. And the 5th is obviously the Bigfoot. one of the more prominent archetypes that's showing up within the modern consciousness. And yes, I do see it as a kind of atavistic archetype. The wild man of like ancient Celtic lore, for instance,
Oh.
the wild man isn't just something that exists in Europe. It's sort of a universal symbol, an archetype, and it's both light and dark in the same way the sort of Dionysus archetype is. At one end, it can represent a sort of atavistic regression into barbarism. On the other hand, it can represent like a deep connection to nature and the natural world. And I think it's both. I think the archetype is showing up twofold. Some people encounter it and see it as a sort of numinous archetype of the natural world. Others may see it as representing a sort of violent regression towards animal or primal state, which we kind of are seeing in the culture now with, people becoming more tribalistic, people becoming less ego driven and more driven by collective. In a way that doesn't is in that sense as well, kind of behaving in a way that doesn't honor the light of individuality and of the ego. So it's sort of regressing back to an animalist state. We also see it in the kind of propagation of might makes right philosophies within the political domain as well, where we've turned away from kind of enlightenment values and reason towards a more I have the big stick, therefore you have to do what
I'm going to close the Strait of Hormuz. No, I'm going to close the Strait.
Yeah.
No, I'm going to close it even harder. No, I'm
Yes. Which is why I think the Bigfoot archetype is showing up in many ways is as a representation of our kind of regression to a more primitive, less anthroposophical state. So we're moving away from like the anthropos into something more alien, either primitively alien or alien in terms of our new kind of stellar myths that we're seeing in that sense. But none of them really take into account the anthropos, the human center, the kind of Christ archetype in that sense. So it is worrying when you see these archetypal constellations making themselves present within culture, because most people aren't thinking about them in the twilight language of mythopoetic archetypes of the unconscious. They're thinking about them either too literally or too symbolically. Whereas it's, again, the aqua permanence, it's in the middle. It's both material and psychic. And the psyche is also deeply affected by matter in the same way matter is deeply affected by the psyche. The aqua permanence, again, represents the unity before the waters above and below were separated in Genesis. So it's a psychic substance as well as a material substance. It represents the material waters of the earth as well as the celestial waters of the heavens. It's twofold, and it kind of acts as a mirror to whatever consciousness it's being faced by. And yes, one of the things that has come out of the aqua permanence is the Bigfoot archetype, which I think is both kind of joyous and free and Dionysian aspect of it, but there's also like a very kind of scary, atavistic, kind of primitive aspect of it as well, for sure.
Indeed. Well, we are at the end of our the first part for members, so join for the second part. And my next question will be, we covered this briefly last time, but the Antichrist archetype. You mentioned it, but what is the Antichrist archetype and how does it connect to the whole ufology mess? Join Patreon, AB Prime, or YouTube membership.
Alright, YouTube. That's the video. Me personally, I learned a lot. It was a lot of stuff that I didn't know that she was talking about. So yeah, she seems pretty knowledgeable about all this. But I don't think that was a cool podcast because I gravitate towards these type of things. So yeah, I thought it was cool. And it too. And I'm grateful for everybody who made it this far. And yes, I'll see you soon. And hope you guys have a good day or night whenever you see this. And yeah. See you next time. Peace.